Welcome to Behind the Caution Tape. I'm your host, CrashLit, and I'm recording this out of the Surf House on 29th Street. Thank you to everyone who's tuning into this. It means a lot, and I'm really excited to do this and share my love of USC with all of you. So before we start getting into the different USC teams that have currently started or are about to start their seasons, I'd like to introduce myself. So I'm USC's #1 sports fan, and I try to go to as many USC home games as possible and a few away ones here and there, depending on where they are and what the occasion is. So I'm really looking forward to doing this. And without further ado, let's get into the biggest news that's kind of covering and kind of leading off with this season. USC is now in their third week in the Big Ten Conference after previously having been in the Pac-12 conference for most of its athletic history. So what does this mean to be in the Big Ten? I think what it means is USC now obviously is getting more money out of the Big Ten's media deal than they were with the Pac-12, but it also means more travel, especially with the Big Ten being a Midwestern-based conference and USC being based in Los Angeles. So definitely means more travel to away games, but also means new rivalries. New traditions, I guess, too. And I think it's going to be interesting, different, but really exciting. And for a lot of reasons, I'm looking forward to it, especially to see USC play new teams like Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, Wisconsin, Purdue, Maryland, Rutgers, Michigan State, just to name a few. Obviously, I know there's more, and the Big Ten is now at 18 teams. But also, I mean, there will still be some traditional rivalries that USC fans know and love. Like, obviously, the Crosstown Showdown isn't going anywhere, as UCLA is in the Big Ten as well. But also, Oregon and Washington made the move as well, alongside the LA schools. So fans will also still get to see the Ducks and the Huskies play a lot as well, but also see some new teams come to town. And now that we've got that out of the way, let's get into the USC women's soccer. First team to get the 2024-2025 sports season underway. So women's soccer having to play definitely an interesting year. They're in their first year in the Big Ten as discussed, but also they are now having to play off campus this year as their new stadium, Rollinson Stadium, is currently under construction and being built. And what that means is they are playing most of their home games in Carson, California, with 2 games in mid to late October at the LA Coliseum where the football team plays. Those will be Ohio State on October 17th and UCLA on October 27th. But for now, the Trojans have had an interesting start to the year. They have zero non-conference home matches as part of it. And I think that is what makes this extra impressive of what this team has done. They're off to a 2-0-1 start. They've had 3 away matches so far, 3 more to go, all of them non-conference. And then they'll be having to travel a lot for Big Ten play once they get into it in mid-September. So let's go over their results. Trojans went to New Mexico State on August 15th for a date in Las Cruces with the Aggies. Walked out there with a 2-2 draw, so started the season off 0-0-1. 3 days later, on August 18th, paid a visit to Cal Baptist in Riverside and got a 1-0 victory after an early goal from Maley Hayes. And then Pepperdine, a second half rally, gave the Trojans a 3-1 victory over the Waves. So the Trojans definitely having bit of travel and a bit more coming up, as next week on August 31st, they'll visit the Portland Pilots up in Portland for another battle as their non-conference road trip continues. So overall, I think this team, like I said, is going to be really interesting to watch, especially with all the travel, not just for away games, but also home games. And that's what I think makes it impressive that they've already started off 2-0-1. And it's definitely going to be an interesting and competitive conference, especially when you have UCLA in the mix too, who's just 2 years removed from a national championship. Trojans' big rival there. So obviously that's definitely going to be exciting to watch with USC women's soccer. And now let's turn to USC women's volleyball. Trojans, after going through a lot of change, lost captain outside hitter Skylar Fields. She ran out of eligibility, but definitely left a legacy and a lot of memories for fans in Galen Center. But the big names that Brad Keller has and is counting on this season will be setter Mia Tuaniga and graduate transfer Allie Batenhorst from Nebraska. And Batenhorst, I think, could be a big playmaker for the Trojans this year and a good go-to option on the outside, especially with her experience being at Nebraska. And Nebraska is right now a powerhouse. They've made it into the Final Four the last 2 seasons, and last year couldn't quite secure the natty, losing to Texas, who's also been on a tear. But so Trojans going into a very competitive Big Ten conference. Before they do that, they will start their season with 2 games at Pepperdine. So August 30th at 6 p.m., then August 31st for a second match for a rematch the following night. Both those in Malibu at Firestone Fieldhouse for the Trojans. And obviously, as I mentioned, roster looking a little different, but head coach Brad Keller does have some options returning with libero Gala Trubant, middle blocker Lindsay Miller, middle blocker Tyra Ariel, and obviously Mia Tuaniga, but then also and outside hitter London Weejay. But then also Keller did bring in some notable transfers in addition to Batenhorst, like Greg Gosnell, who came from Indiana. And Keller definitely seems to be having a way with getting Indiana undergrads to come to USC, as last year he did bring Emily Fitzner onto the team as well. But she is also out of eligibility, so she's no longer with the team. But overall, Trojans definitely looking to impress. They clocked in at 21st on the AVCA rankings and definitely will be looking to make some noise in their new conference. And I think they could be a dangerous team, especially as they've really done a good job, I think, reloading in preparation to play in arguably the best conference in all of college volleyball. And finally, let's get to some football action here. So the USC football team opens their season on Sunday, September 1st, with a date against LSU at Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas. And what I find very interesting about this matchup is how similar the two teams are, from the coaching staffs all the way onto the field personnel. And both teams looking to try to rebound because they have high expectations, especially USC moving into a very competitive Big Ten alongside Oregon, Washington, and UCLA. And then also you got Ohio State is pretty loaded, I would argue. And then Penn State looking to try to make noise. Michigan, obviously, looking to keep going from where they were after following the departure of Jim Harbaugh. But overall, it's going to be definitely an interesting year. And back to the subject, let's start with the coaches. So Lincoln Riley and Brian Kelly, both in their 3rd years, were lured away from their previous stops, Riley at Oklahoma, Kelly at Notre Dame, with large compensation packages at their new employers. Both of them Riley making just over $10 million, Kelly about little under, about 9.5, I believe, is maybe a little more than that. But overall, the coaches are being paid. They're in their 3rd year. Their seats are, I would argue, starting to warm up after seeming to not quite hit as the expectations fans were hoping for. But then also you look at the offenses. They have had both teams had pretty electric offenses the past 2 years and produced Heisman winning quarterbacks, Caleb Williams in 2022 and Jaden Daniels for LSU in 2020 last season in 2023. So I think it's going to but both of them are now off to the NFL. Williams was the number 1 pick to the Chicago Bears. Daniels went 2nd overall to the Washington Commanders. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see how Kelly and Riley adjust with their new quarterbacks. And then also the defense. Both teams have struggled on defense the past 2 years. And let's get into the USC side of things now that we've kind of covered kind of how I see these teams as being similar and what's going to make a very interesting matchup. And this one could go either way. I think it's a total toss-up. LSU is a 4.5-point favorite, but I think USC could pull the upset if they play smart and if their revamped defense is good. And now let's get into the USC defense. So obviously, as USC fans know, Alex Grinch was fired the day after that brutal loss to the Washington Huskies last fall in November. And since then, Lincoln Riley has hired D'Anton Lynn who helped turn around UCLA's defense to revive to help bring up the standard of defense and make the Trojans more competitive. So I think the defense is going to be better for the Trojans, but can it compete with the best of the Big Ten is really the question that we're going to need to get answered. And we won't. And obviously the LSU game is going to be a great test to see where this team is at. But obviously we'll see what the real test is when Trojans open in Ann Arbor at Michigan Stadium for a date against the Wolverines on September 21st. But we'll talk more about that as that one approaches. So we'll see what D'Anton Lynn has done. And I think obviously the defense seems to be obviously getting bigger guys, more physical, but then also it seems a lot more simple and straightforward than the scheme that Alex Grinch was trying to run. And that seems kind of like, from what I've been hearing, that players are responding better to it and it makes a lot more sense. Then as for the offense, Caleb Williams is off to the NFL, and that leaves Miller Moss, the new starter for the Trojans. And I think it's going to be a battle this year at quarterback. And I think just because Miller Moss won it now, I think Jade Mayava, who transferred from UNLV, could give him a fight all season long for that battle. And it sounded like, according to Riley himself, that it was a neck and neck competition. Miller Moss even admitted that Mayava was pushing him throughout the season to kind of hold on to it. And keep in mind, people thought Miller Moss probably had the job in hand after his 6 touchdown pass performance in the Holiday Bowl last December. I was at that game. It was insane to be at. And it was just it just was a fun way to send off the season. And I think that's going to make it so it's going to be a lot. So I think obviously, Riley even joked that he thought maybe he'd scared off anyone else who might have been interested. Most notably, Kansas State transfer Will Howard was reportedly interested, I think, but he ultimately ended up going to Ohio State. So maybe Riley was right, but didn't deter Jaden Mayava. And I saw him in the spring game, and I was impressed. He's a big guy. He could run. He could throw. So I am very impressed. So I think it's going to be a very neck-and-neck battle this year between both Moss and Mayava. And just because Moss was named the starter for game 1 doesn't mean that things will change by week to week, I would say. Obviously, I'm going to have to see how Moss will do with that. But overall, other than that, Trojans do now have a special teams coordinator in Brian Dowtrey. So obviously, fans going to be happy about that, especially after there have been some special teams miscues. I think with Riley, it was tough needing to only having 10 on-field assistants. Now you can have more. There are now 3 additional on-field spots. So Riley finally able to take advantage and have a dedicated special teams coordinator, which I think could benefit the entire special teams, especially after some botched punts and kickoffs last season. But yeah, so it's definitely going to be a very interesting game to see. I'm really looking forward to this one. I will be going to it, and it's going to be definitely, I think, a good time. Obviously, I'm a little nervous, but it's how it goes sometimes. It's college football. That's what I love about it, and I think it's going to be great. In addition to that, I will also be at both of those Pepperdine women's volleyball matches in Malibu on Friday and Saturday, and then that Sunday, September 1st, I'm going to be getting in my car and heading out to Vegas in time for the game. So leaving early, 5-hour road trip, always fun. Done those before. But I think it's going to be a very interesting season. Before we go, let's run through the calendar. In addition to everything we covered, the cross-country team has a meet at Pepperdine on Friday night, August 30th. So for their first competition of the season. Yeah, they're taking part in the Pepperdine Waves Invitational. So a lot of these teams, just outside of football, seeming to take part in having a competition or event at Pepperdine. Seems kind of like the hot spot right now, I guess you could say. But overall, yeah, I'm really looking forward to doing this. Thank you to everyone who tunes in, and I can't wait to do this more. And obviously, as we go on, I'm hoping do this more with a co-host, with have a co-host, do some guest interviews with different USC athletes on different teams, especially ones whose teams are doing well or have an interesting matchup or just interesting stories. Just definitely trying, want to have fun with this. Definitely, obviously, looking forward to doing this. And I'm really, really excited to do this. And obviously, so thank you all for tuning in. If you see me at any sports events, feel free to come say hi. Love to talk more with you about this, USC, anything really. So looking forward to it all. So Trojan family, thank you again for spending part of your day with me. And I look forward to seeing you all soon at a game. Fight on.